Hi everybody from Best. This is Miss Tammy, the case manager at the Hesperia location. I wanted to touch base with all of you. I know this is kind of a weird time with everybody having to stay home, but we're all doing our part so that this virus can stop spreading. So good for everybody for doing their part. I thought it would be kind of fun to maybe read to you each day out of this really cool book I found. It's called The Secret of Goldenrod. It's kind of a big book, so we probably won't get through all of it in a week, but I was going to read you a chapter each day. So today we're going to start with chapter 1, and it's a really fun story. I hope that you enjoy it. Trina pushed up the brim of her baseball cap and strained against her seatbelt to look through the dusty, bug-smeared windshield. "Do you see it yet, Papa?" Her dad shook his head, yawning. 2 full days of driving since they left New Mexico were nothing compared to the eternity of the last 20 minutes of this narrow 2-lane road with nothing on either side but cornfields. The ball game on the radio turned to garbled voices and then to static. "Read me the directions again," her dad said, turning off the radio. "The part after we exit the highway." Trina reached for the letter, the smudged and crumpled letter she'd read a million times. "Go east until you come to the big red barn with 3 silos. Then turn left onto the dirt road. After the double bump, cross the creek and turn right." "That's it? That's all it says?" "Yep," Trina said. And then she continued to read the letter out loud with brand new excitement. "The house is a Queen Anne with 6 bedrooms, 4 fireplaces, a library, a parlor, and a butler's pantry." Wait a minute. How could she have missed this every time she's read this letter? "Papa, it doesn't say anything about bathrooms." "It better have indoor plumbing." "There's always, you know," he pointed at the cornfields. "No way," Trina said, grimacing. Then she rushed to her favorite part of the letter. "The Harlan M. Roy family was giving you 1 year to restore the house to marketable condition." No matter how many times she read that line, she couldn't believe it. 1 whole year was almost like having a real home. And now she couldn't wait to get there. "Please hurry, Papa." "Hurry? Any faster and I might miss the turn." "Please," Trina insisted, knowing her dad was often too calm about important things. "How about you read and I drive," he said. Trina scrunched up her face at him and turned back to the letter. "Mechanical systems are functional but not up to code. A credit account has been established at Hank's Tool and Lumber on Main Street for all your supplies. The key to the front door will be under the mat. At your service, Mr. Gerald Shugstad." Trina sighed. 6 bedrooms and 4 fireplaces. "Biggest house we've ever fixed up," her dad said. "But what's a Queen Anne?" "The fancy kind, with gingerbread and wraparound porches." "Gingerbread?" Trina asked. "You know, all that frilly trim they used to put on the eaves of the roof." Her dad drew curlicues in the air when he spoke. "It'll probably look like a wedding cake." Trina imagined the house as big and fancy as a palace, and herself as the princess with a grand bedroom and servants. But what's marketable condition? "So it can be sold. It's been in the same family for over 100 years, but nobody's lived there for a really long time. Some great-great-nephew in New York inherited it, and he's decided he'd rather have the money than the house." Trina looked out her window, watching row after row after row of corn, thinking about what her dad had said. "That's sad. If I had a house that had been in my family for 100 years, I'd want to keep it forever, wouldn't you?" Her dad shook his head. "People always want what they don't have. If they have big, they want small. If they have the country, they want the city. If they stay too long in one place, they want to get moving. And if they're always moving, sometimes they want to stay put, Trina added, looking forward to a new Royal Iowa home, at least for a year anyway. Her dad reached over and tugged the bill of her baseball cap. Until they catch the traveling bug all over again like you and me. Trina didn't actually have the traveling bug, but her dad did, and her mother had it worst of all. Her mother was exactly the restless person her dad was talking about. He always said that she was trying to find herself. Luckily, her postcards, which came from all over the world, had no problem finding Trina wherever she was. The last one came from Tanzania in Africa. Sounds like Mom, she said. I guess, said her dad. Trina was used to the silence that followed any mention of her mother. She figured her dad missed her so much that he couldn't really talk about her. But the more postcards she got, the more curious about her mother Trina became. She hadn't seen her mother in nearly 8 years, and she had no idea of what her mother even looked like now, or how she was dressed or wore her hair, if she liked sports. Someday her mother would run out of places to visit. Then maybe she'd come home. As the truck crested the hill, Trina could see a big red barn in a shallow valley below. There's the red barn, she said, with silos. She leaned forward in her seat. 1, 2, 3. And when they reached the bottom of the hill, there was the dirt road. They took a left turn and bounced off the main road onto nothing more than a rutted dirt path and cut through the field of cornstalk taller than the truck. They were almost there now. Trina could feel it. With the urge to jump out of the truck and run the rest of the way, she rolled down her window and stuck her head out into the steamy August air, watching for any sign of a house at the end of the tunnel of the dirt road and corn. The truck bounced over a large bump and a loud ka-thunk, and Trina bounced with the truck. The old cargo trailer heaved behind them, sounding like it was ready to snap off. Ka-thunk! The truck jolted again. I guess that's a double bump, said her dad. Trina checked the trailer in the rearview mirror, glad to see that it was still attached. Look, Trina cried, up there, I see the bridge. The truck shuddered over the wooden bridge and headed straight for a wall of corn. That's the creek. Turn right, Papo, turn right. Her dad placed one big, calm hand over the other and turned the wheel. What else would we do but turn right? All of a sudden, Trina had a funny feeling that the house was waiting for them. And they were running late. She kept her eyes glued to the windshield as the truck rolled on and on through the cornfield. Her dad's cell phone rang just once before it went silent. He glanced at his blank screen. So much for cell service out here, I guess. At that moment, the cornfields gave way to a meadow of tall yellow flowers. And then a big gray house with gables and chimneys emerged, as if it were growing straight out of the ground. Her dad put his foot on the brake and let the truck inch its way up the tall black wrought iron gate. Trina could feel her mouth hanging open as she stared through the bars and the gate at the enormous house. The house was not what she had expected. It didn't need to be fixed up. It needed to be torn down. Boards covered all the windows, and the few shutters that remained dangled from their hinges. Pillars that would have held the porch roof up, if the porch had still been there, lay in the weeds like fallen trees. Trina blinked and blinked, hoping that when she opened her eyes, it would be the palace she imagined. But with each blink, the house just looked worse. There wasn't a fleck of paint on the wind-beaten siding or a crumb of gingerbread anywhere. If the house was supposed to look like a wedding cake, the bride had to be an evil witch. Papo! I know what you're thinking, he said, shifting the truck into park just before he let out a sweeping whistle. Woo-wee! Isn't she a beauty? No, their next project was not a beauty. It was a hopeless old house sitting in the middle of a yellow sea like a dried-up island. We aren't really going to live here, are we? Trina asked. Trina, her dad said in surprise. You know I signed a contract. Besides, I think it's going to be a lot of fun working on this place. Fun? Fun was playing softball. Fun was going to the movies. Fun was not fixing up an old decrepit house in the middle of nowhere. Trina sat helplessly in the truck when her dad got out and waded through the sea of yellow flowers. He pushed open the side of the big black gate, which squealed in protest. And then on the other side, which was just as rusty, he hopped back into the driver's seat without closing the door and let his foot drag through the snapping overgrowth as they crawled to the top beneath the gnarled arm of a giant oak tree. What if I make a swing and hang it from this big branch for you? Trina sighed, disappointed by the house, and even more disappointed that her dad for still thinking that she was a little girl. He should know that an almost fifth grader was too big or too old for a swing. Reluctantly, Trina got out of the truck. She felt as limp as the tall flowers around her, until the eerie feeling that someone was watching her from the highest window, a window that was all boarded up, snapped to attention. She shivered despite the heat. Papa, do you think it's haunted? You and your imagination, he said, shaking his head. If I've said it once, I've said it 1,000,000 times. There's no such thing as a haunted house. He hooked his thumbs in his belt loops and looked up at the house. Try seeing her for the masterpiece she really is. Pointing up at the roof, he said, See the fancy corbels under the eaves? Trina had no idea what a corbel was. But she knew that she saw nothing but gray weathered wood. Sure, she said. And just think about sitting on the porch and sipping lemonade all afternoon, or sliding down the porch railing into the front yard. Almost fifth graders were also too old for sliding down railings, and there was no porch. And the front yard was an overgrown mass of weeds. But Trina nodded anyway. Arguing with Papa at a time like this would be as hopeless as that old house. And that turret. That what? Trina said, feeling her voice getting sadder and sadder. The little tower with the pointed roof. He cupped his hands around his mouth and shouted, Rapunzel! Rapunzel! Right then, as if answering his call, a small bird darted from its nest in the eaves, which made Trina wonder what else might be living in that big abandoned house. The turret is fit for a princess just like you. Windows on all the sides for a view of our own country gardens. Then he yanked one of the tall yellow flowers from the ground, roots and all. Look at all these weeds. No wonder they call her Goldenrod. Who? The house. That's the house's name. Sure. The house has a name? Sure she does. And isn't she amazing? She's what you might call a grande dame. He bowed to the house as if it were royalty. I am honored to make your acquaintance, Madame Goldenrod. Trina looked up at Madame Goldenrod, but the only amazing thing about her was that she was still standing. Even so, she tried to play along with her dad's giant dream, even if she tried to imagine the house with a coat of paint. She's such a beautiful... But there was nothing at all beautiful about this house. Trina's eyes shifted from the drab, clapboard house to the sparkling meadow of yellow goldenrod. Yellow, she said, trying to sound excited. After all, yellow was her mother's favorite color. Then yellow shall be, her dad said. He took the steps, nothing but stacked bricks and rotted planks, 2 at a time, and playfully knocked to the faded no trespassing sign tacked to the door. The key's under the mat, Trina reminded him. But that didn't matter. One of the big wooden double doors creaked open all on its own, and he stepped inside. Trina slowly went up the makeshift steps and paused as the door opened. She lifted a corner of the ragged doormat, which was anything but welcoming, and there was no key. She peeled away the doormat completely, revealing a rectangle of dark wood where the doormat had sat forever, but still no key. "Trina," her dad's distant voice called. "Coming," she said. But with her first step across the threshold into the pitch-black house, she felt like she was coming into someplace where she didn't belong. As if the darkness was a suspicious old lady, her white cobweb hair tied up in a bun, standing with her dusty hands on her hips, blocking Trina's way. Trina stopped dead in her tracks, wishing she had stayed in the truck. Power must be off," her dad said. He called from somewhere in the darkness. "Shoot," he said as Trina heard him slap his pockets. "No flashlight. Luckily I have my lighter." A tiny dot of flame appeared like a lightning bug. The creaks of his footsteps moved farther away, taking the dot of light with them. And then something squealed like a mad cat. "Popo!" Trina yelled, scared that the house had gotten him. "It's just a squeaky door," he hollered back. More doors squeaked and boots clomped down hollow steps. He must have been heading to the basement to turn on the electricity. If a house this old even had electricity. The air inside the house was thick, and somehow it even smelled forgotten. The door tickled her nose as she sneezed so hard the noise echoed around her, making her feel very small and very alone. Except for the strange feeling that she wasn't. A light came on in a distant room. It was dim and flickering, but Trina could see enough to know that it was standing in a foyer as big as she was standing in a foyer as big as a hotel lobby. In front of her was a grand staircase that reached into the blackness of the second floor, while the rest of the house stretched off forever and ever into the shadows. "Man, is our work cut out for us," her dad said, his voice bouncing in the emptiness. "But she has steam heat, and someone delivered us a brand new refrigerator, washer and dryer. And lucky for you, I passed a bathroom on my way to the basement, right by the servants' stairs." He pushed the top button of the odd-looking light switch on the wall, and a few dusty bulbs of fancy chandelier with beads and prisms lit up high above Trina's head. The speckled light revealed pale wood floors, but the banisters, doors, and archways were made of dark wood. "Look at this place," he said. "The whole house is trimmed in mahogany." Mahogany schmogany. The house was dark and creepy, and it smelled like a cellar. "It's steam heat. Is steam heat a good thing?" "Steam heat's amazing," he said, standing at the tips of his boots to examine the tarnished brass sconce mounted on the wall. "Watch this," he said as he turned a valve on the bottom of the sconce and flicked his lighter. A flame shot up out of the top of the sconce at the same time. An electric bulb glowed beneath it. They didn't trust electricity back then, so the fixtures used gas too. Then, without a word, he sprinted past the staircase, pushed open two fancily carved sliding doors, and pulled them shut again, leaving Trina by herself in the foyer. "Pocket doors," he shouted. His voice was muffled. "I think I'm in the library." There are built-in bookcases everywhere. Before Trina had a chance to be scared, he slid the doors back open. Trina was actually curious about the library. Maybe books had been left behind. She'd be happy for any sign that people had really lived here once. But one look around the big dreary room made her heart sink. The library shelves and forest's worth of mahogany were completely empty. Trina stayed close to her dad as they walked past the deep, blackened fireplace toward another pair of pocket doors. These doors led to the darkest of rooms. Ah, the smoking room, her dad said, inhaling deeply. You can still smell the burning pipe tobacco. Even with the light on, the room was really dark. Her dad spotted a doorknob nearly invisible in the heavy paneling and turned it. Look, a secret passageway. Trina was afraid he'd leave her alone again, so she grabbed hold of his t-shirt and followed him. Where are we, Papo? Trina asked as they walked down the passageway in the darkness. Under the stairs, he said. And if I'm right, this room will be... He paused to open the second door to another disappearingly empty room with another dusty chandelier. The dining room, just as I suspected. Trina let go of his t-shirt. Man, look at that buffet, her dad said, pointing at the long cupboard with a big mirror above it. And those French doors must lead outside, he added, glancing at the wall of boards. As he kept going, passing under the spindled archway into the room as big as a school gym, which had a huge fireplace and another elaborate chandelier. From there, Trina could see the archway that led back to the foyer. Trina sensed that whoever or whatever had met her at the front door was still standing there, waiting. Trina quickly turned back on the foyer. Is this the living room? Yep. But I think they called them parlors back then. His voice was muffled again. This time he was reaching up inside the chimney. Metal clanked against metal, and he forced open the flue. When he crawled back out, a look of deep concern crossed his face. She's got good bones, but Trina waited for the next word, wondering if he felt the presence of someone in the house the way she did. She held her breath, and he looked up from the boarded-up bay window to the curling wallpaper and crackled plaster on the ceiling. She has good bones, but what? He kicked at a bit of fallen plaster. She suffered from being empty. The hair on Trina's arms prickled. What do you mean? A house goes downhill when no one lives in it. It needs people. People who love it. He wiped his sooty hands on his pants. I guess I'm saying she needs us. Trina didn't like thinking of a house as something that needed her. I think it's too much work, Papo. Nah, nothing stops us, he said with a big grin. And then he put his hand on her shoulder. I bet some lunch will perk you up. The kitchen is back this way, he said, pointing through the dining room. I'll get the cooler. At the far end of the dining room was a swinging door that screeched as Trina pushed through it into what had to be the butler's pantry because it was full of a million empty cabinets with leaded glass doors. She pushed through another swinging door and finally arrived at the kitchen, big enough for 10 cooks. The walls were covered with white tiles, and the sink was nearly as big as a bathtub. Above the sink was a boarded-up window, and between the sink and the big black stove was a doorway to a small bathroom. A boarded-up black door and a plain, narrow staircase that led both up and down the servants' stairway. As Trina ran her hand along the marble countertop, she found a bill. Spot Right House Cleaning, Davenport, Iowa, with a bill, paid in full. Knowing she wouldn't have to do the cleaning was the first good thing about Goldenrod. And then she realized the kitchen floor was filthy, which meant the cleaners hadn't done a very good job. A loud screech made Trina jump, but she quickly recognized the sound of nails being ripped from wood. More screeches were followed by a bang, and a board fell off the kitchen window, and sunlight poured over the sink. Standing outside was her dad, waving at Trina with his hammer, his sweaty face as red as the bandana that he held in his other hand. Trina leaned across the sink and shouted at the closed window, "What about the cooler?" Her dad frowned, which meant that he'd forgotten all about lunch. He held up his finger and mouthed the words, 1 minute. 1 minute, right. 1 minute to Papa was like an hour to everyone else. Whenever he started a project, he'd lose track of time. Sometimes he even forgot what day it was. Sighing for at least the 100th time that day, Trina turned on the cold water faucet and was promptly splashed with rusty brown water that smelled like a swamp. Yuck, she said out loud. She left the faucet on, just like her dad had taught her, hoping the dirty water would eventually clear. Creak. Trina jumped again, as annoyed by her jumpiness as she was by the noises. Better oil this door, her dad said, coming through the swinging door. He set the cooler, topped with 2 bags of groceries, on the kitchen counter. How about I make you a peanut butter sandwich? I'm old enough to make lunch, Papo. You bet, he said. Then he spotted the bill on the counter. Davenport? That's a long way to drive to clean a house. I would have cleaned it myself for that much. How about you? Trina shook her head. No way. Even if the cleaners hadn't done a very good job, she had to give them credit for cleaning up the cobwebs and the bugs and whatever else might have been living in the house for 100 years. And then she put 2 and 2 together. She imagined the cleaners washing and sweeping, working hard until they heard a noise and the hairs on their necks prickled and they felt like something was watching them. Scared to death, they raced out of the house before they finished, too frightened to put the key back under the mat. Water looks pretty good, her dad said as he turned off the faucet. Then he pulled out a little notepad and his contractor's pencil. The pages were already filling with lists and calculations. I need to trim that oak tree before it rips any more slate off the roof. Lucky it's slate. Should last another 100 years. As he talked and made notes, Trina unloaded paper plates, plastic cups, plastic silverware, and a big roll of paper towels. All the luxuries of living out of a truck. Followed by the basics: peanut butter, grapes, spaghetti, pickles, milk, bread, butter, instant coffee, and dish soap. First real order of business, we'll be putting in a new septic system before the ground freezes, said her dad. Trina's dad stopped on the jar of pickles. A new septic system. Does that mean we can't use the bathroom? He laughed. We might get a few surprises, but yes, we can use the bathroom. What kinds of surprises? Trina asked, slathering peanut butter on 2 pieces of bread and layering a pickle between them, just the way he liked it. And then she made her own sandwich. No pickles. You never know what can happen with these old houses, he said, just as the ceiling light flickered. Trina raised her eyebrows. Was that one of the surprises? Nah, he said without looking up. That's just a bulb that's loose in the socket. Trina poured milk into plastic cups and set the peanut butter sandwiches on paper plates. Her dad slipped his pencil over his ear and grabbed half of his sandwich, downing it in 2 bites. I'm going into town to get some lumber for the new porch. I'll need every inch of room in the truck. You stay here, okay? He grabbed the other half of his sandwich. Maybe unpack the trailer. All by myself? She squeaked. Not everything, he said, as he crumpled up his paper plate and stuffed it into an empty grocery bag. I'll help with the big stuff. Should be back in a couple of hours. Unpacking the trailer by herself was not what Trina had meant. But the last thing she wanted was for her dad to think that she was afraid to be alone. There's no such thing as a haunted house. There's no such thing as a haunted house. If there was ever a chance to prove that she was growing up, this was it. Trying to sound brave, she said, I'll pick out my room while you're gone. And that's the end of chapter 1. So Trina and her dad are just getting settled into the new house, and there's going to be a lot of exciting things ahead in this story. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.